Good old TikTok. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Hannah. I am a non-diet dietitian, and today we're going to be watching some TikToks together. If you follow me on TikTok, you know that I talk about intuitive eating a lot on my page, and I often give examples of what intuitive eating is versus what it definitely isn't. And today we're going to go through a few videos that really demonstrate what intuitive eating isn't. Before we get into it, I want to give a disclaimer that there will be some discussion of weight here today, so if talking about that is not supportive of your journey, feel free to skip this one. Some of the creators that we are going to be reviewing also use a lot of choice language, so just a little fair warning there. But let's go ahead and get right into it.
Eating intuitively for weight loss is a recipe for fucking disaster.
Okay, we're gonna stop right there. So far, this is 100% correct. Intuitive eating is not a weight loss approach. And if you do use intuitive eating for weight loss, you have a high likelihood of being disappointed and ending up back in that restrict binge cycle. I have a whole video talking about what's going to happen to your weight when you start intuitive eating. I highly recommend watching it to learn more about this topic because there is a lot to be said about it. And I think it's a really good watch if you are sort of on the fence about intuitive eating because you have weight loss goals. If we are thinking about weight loss or what's going to happen to our weight the entire time we're trying to do intuitive eating, we're not going to actually be able to tune in to our hunger and fullness and cravings and what our body is actually trying to tell us it wants and needs, because instead we'll be thinking about how many calories does this food have? Does it have the amount of protein that I need? What's going to happen to my weight when I eat this food? This just leads to us using external information to make our food choices for us instead of using our interoceptive internal awareness. Your weight is an external factor, and intuitive eating is, again, all about tuning into that internal wisdom that you have. All right, let's move on.
If you tell somebody who is overweight, who is trying to lose weight, to just eat intuitively and listen to your body, they're just gonna eat the same fucking shit that got them overweight in the first place. Like, are you fucking kidding? The average person that's trying to lose weight typically eats a diet that's high in processed carbs, high in processed sugars, and that's their default. That's what their body is going to intuitively want to eat because it's what they've been eating for so long. So I get it, intuitive eating, it sounds so nice and fun and just listen to your body. Yeah, go let that person just eat all the same shit that got them in that spot in the first place 24/7 because they're intuitively listening to their intuition. Like, it's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life.
This is a really common misconception about intuitive eating. The idea that if we stop dieting and we put faith in ourselves to make food choices without following diet rules, that if we do that, we are just going to end up eating cake and pizza and brownies and ice cream all the time. And yeah, those types of foods are delicious. I myself have processed carbs and processed sugar on a regular basis, as many intuitive eaters do. But it would not feel good to eat those foods 24/7. And honestly, it's pretty messed up to assume that anyone who is overweight or obese is just eating those types of foods 24/7. It illustrates the idea that if your body does not meet the standard of what health is based on diet culture's guidelines, then your body is not to be trusted. What it sounds like this person is saying is unless you are thin, you don't get to do intuitive eating. And that is absolutely not what intuitive eating is about. Anyways, when you first ditch the diets, you might go through this rebellion, or otherwise known as the honeymoon phase. This is where you eat those foods that were previously deemed off limits. And doing this is actually highly recommended. It's part of the process. We can't just say in our head, oh, we're done dieting, but not actually eat the foods that we haven't allowed ourselves to eat this entire time. We have to actually eat those foods to make peace with them. But this is not the end stage of intuitive eating. That is just taking into account one of the 10 principles. There are 9 other principles to work through, one of them being gentle nutrition, where we actually make food choices that support our well-being. All right, on to the next part.
So intuitive eating for someone who's overweight trying to lose weight, especially as a beginner, terrible idea. Transitioning though into intuitive eating after you've learned how to eat properly, after you've learned how to fuel your body properly with whole and nutritious foods, at that point I think it makes sense because I do that. But for someone just trying to lose weight, telling them to just eat intuitively, you're setting them up for failure.
No. Again, there are other principles of intuitive eating that extend beyond just like making peace with these foods and honoring hunger and fullness. The principle of intuitive eating that is often neglected, whether unintentionally or intentionally, hard to say, is principle 10, which is that principle of incorporating gentle nutrition. This is a very, very important part of intuitive eating, where people learn to eat foods that make them feel good. Intuitive eating is supposed to feel good, and it's not going to feel good to just eat pizza and cake. Can you eat those foods? Yeah, of course. I eat those foods on a regular basis. They're delicious and wonderful, but I would not feel good if I had pizza every single day for every single meal. But the kicker is, I actually recommend incorporating this process of like the gentle nutrition thing opposite of what this creator just said. They suggested doing this piece, essentially is what they were getting at, doing this part first, learning how to eat healthy, and then starting to eat intuitively. But gentle nutrition actually needs to be the very last part of your intuitive eating journey. If we try to do gentle nutrition first, we are just going to be turning intuitive eating into a whole nother diet. What this creator is suggesting is not actually making peace with foods. They're saying you should make peace with food if it's healthy food, but you shouldn't make peace with foods if it's unhealthy foods that overweight people eat. All right, for our next one, we've got a little bit of a gym bro vibe going on, so hold on tight.
Intuitive eating is the worst named fitness trend in history.
We're gonna stop it right there. I'm gonna focus here on the fitness trend thing that he just said. Intuitive eating is not a fitness trend. I will agree that intuitive eating is being talked about a lot more, which could lead to one making the argument that it is trendy, but intuitive eating is just eating how we were born to eat. We are born as intuitive eaters. We just get so disconnected from our internal wisdom of what, when, how much to eat because of diet culture, fitness culture. Generational dieting plays a huge role here. But calling intuitive eating a trend is like saying that eating is a trend. Without our toxic cultural messaging around food, intuitive eating would just be called eating. I also absolutely despise the image that this person chose for the cover, but it got clicks, so.
Did the people who made it even look at a dictionary? Do you know what intuition means? It means things you do without thinking about it.
Now, I don't want to say that I agree because I don't want to give even the slightest inclination that I'm on the same page as this guy, but it is true that intuitive eating is more than just intuition. Again, there are 10 principles of intuitive eating, and it goes so far beyond just listening to your body. Especially at first, if you have been dieting for weeks, months, years, decades, and you just feel so disconnected from your body. The first piece of this is going to be rebuilding that connection instead of just like jumping in and trying to listen to it, which you just can't do right now. So could the name improve? I mean, yeah, sure, whatever. But I think it's a pretty dumb argument to hitch your wagon to.
Do you think that's gonna be good for our health? If I reach for whatever, whenever, without thinking about it, you know what my diet is? Pizza, burger, fries, ice cream. Almost exclusively.
Oh, with this again. Listen, I am not this person's dietitian, obviously, and I don't want to invalidate this feeling. You might totally feel this way too, where if you were to start intuitive eating, you would be the person who would just eat pizza, cheesecake, whatever. But here's the thing, whenever a client tells me this, that they feel nervous about intuitive eating because they're nervous about the food choices they're going to make, and usually subsequently how their weight is going to be affected, what's usually happening is they have very binary thinking about food. In their minds, and probably in this guy's mind too, foods are either classified as good or bad. There's no thought about the nutrition profile of the food, like what nutrients are actually in them, or how those nutrients affect us. There's no thought about like how certain foods make them feel, what types of foods to eat together for more satisfying eating experiences. Nope, food is either just good or it's bad, based on arbitrary food rules usually from a history of dieting. And when a food is deemed as bad, that means it's usually off limits. And you wanna know what happens when a food is off limits? You wanna have that food so much more. The example I always give that you may have heard of before if you are not new around here is, if you tell a kid that kid cannot go push that big red button over there, do you want to know what that kid wants to do? They want to go push the big red button. So if you tell someone they're not allowed to eat more than X grams of carbs per day, or they're not allowed to eat this particular food, that makes your brain want to have that food so much more. And you can restrict for a while. You can probably hold off, rely on that willpower and motivation for a little bit, but how long is that actually going to be sustainable? Just like with the kid, that kid can probably use all their might to not push that red button for a while, but eventually they're gonna go push their big red button. But if you tell that kid, oh, you can push that button over there if you want to, it's no big deal at all. They might still go do it because it's a cool big red button, but the intention behind it and the motivation behind that choice is going to be totally different. It's the exact same thing with food. You absolutely can and will, as an intuitive eater, eat cookies and brownies and pizza, foods that you really, really enjoy. But once you make peace with these foods and neutralize them and start to view them as something more than just good or bad, you will naturally find a balance of eating nutrient-dense foods as well as less nutrient-dense foods. I know it sounds crazy, especially if you've been dieting for such a long time, but I'm telling you, it is possible to get to this place. All right, back to our old friend here.
So intuitive eating, you have to accept one of two things. Either the name is just awful, or you're gonna be pretty unhealthy. Because clearly what we do by intuition, according to the obesity rates in America, is not the best. Our intuition doesn't serve us well.
All right, I'm making a mental note right now to make an entire video dedicated to the obesity epidemic. I do have an entire podcast episode talking all about it with my co-host. I highly recommend listening to that if you are dying to know my thoughts before I make my full dedicated video on here. But all I wanna say right now is I do wonder if the people that are always ranting about this obesity epidemic have ever considered that maybe we are seeing more obesity because people are dieting more than ever. Diet culture and wellness culture and fitness culture are all multi-billion-dollar industries. People are always trying to lose weight. And that intentional pursuit of weight loss is through some sort of diet. And we know that dieting almost always leads to weight regain. Sometimes weight regain past the initial weight that you were starting at when you started that diet. Most people are not eating intuitively. All of these obese people that they speak of may not be eating intuitively. Also, I said I wouldn't get too much into this because I want to do a whole dedicated video, but people have been obese for as long as time has been around. We are just getting more and more fat phobic as well. But anyway, most people are not eating intuitively. Most people are dieting. Just a little something to think about. All right, let's finish up because I am just getting all hot and sweaty.
The name is either awful or you're not actually intuitive eating.
Again, I'm not going to argue about the name. I have no say in this matter. Take it up with Evelyn and Elise. I just want to end the review of this video by saying that if you feel like your intuition always is going to lead to you eating unhealthy foods, it might help to unpack why that is. What is your relationship with these foods currently like? Do you currently allow foods like that in your life? Or have you not had something like that in so long because you've been dieting? Or do you only eat them when you are binging and so you have a negative experience tied to those foods? All of these different factors could be playing a role into why your intuition is driving you towards those types of foods. All right, up next, we actually have a registered dietitian. So let's see what she has to say.
Here's what I don't like about intuitive eating. They say that all restriction is bad. This is not even true. You already restrict yourself all day long. For example, you don't watch TV 24/7. You also probably don't sleep all day, 7 days a week. Maybe you do that on the weekend, but probably you get up and you go to work. Having some structure, whether it's with TV, whether it's waking up, whether it's with food, having some structure is okay.
Okay, let's start here. Giving yourself permission to eat does not mean that you don't have any structure. I feel like I keep saying this, but intuitive eating is not just eating 24/7, eating whatever you want, free reign. That is probably one of the biggest misconceptions here. So let's play along with that TV analogy, shall we? Watching TV all day is not going to lead to a very fulfilling life. Do you have permission to watch TV all day? Yeah. If you are an adult watching this video, you have permission to do whatever you want, whenever you want, technically. But just because you can watch TV all day does not mean that you will make that choice to do so. Intuitive eating takes into account what foods you have access to, how much time you have to grocery shop and meal plan and actually make the meals you're going to eat. It takes into account, once again, like, how do foods make me feel? Do I have any allergies or any intolerances to foods? Again, just because you can eat all foods, you have permission to do that, this does not mean that there won't be any structure there. In fact, many people that I work with also have jobs. They have kids, they have other responsibilities. This requires meal planning and grocery shopping, and for a lot of us, having a structured routine. Most intuitive eaters can't just eat exactly what sounds good the minute they want to have that food. I myself identify as an intuitive eater, obviously, and as I'm recording this video right now, I could really go for some sushi. But I don't have access to that right now, and I'm obviously in the middle of something. But what I can do is make a mental note of how sushi sounds good right now and make a game plan for future Hannah to get that in her life somehow. I've got structure. I can't just like drop everything and eat whatever whenever I want to, or in the amounts that my brain maybe is telling me to. But that is different than restriction. I am not restricting myself from sushi. So she is correct in saying that intuitive eating recommends removing all restriction, but this is not the same thing as removing structure. When you restrict food, no matter how you go about it, even if you're doing it the healthy way, this restriction makes you want to have that food so much more, as I explained earlier with the big red button analogy. And actually, removing this restriction and giving yourself permission to make whatever choice you want is going to lead to you making choices that actually work for you and your lifestyle, rather than making your food choices based off of a diet with food rules or based out of rebellion. Bottom line here, when you give yourself unconditional permission to eat, you're not going to eat 24/7. Just like you wouldn't want to actually watch TV 24/7. But if you weren't ever allowed to watch TV, wouldn't you want to watch it so much more? All right, we have one more video to review, and this one's interesting because this person claims to be an intuitive eating advocate.
This comment always really bugs me. Intuitive eating is a beautiful way to eat. And when you listen to your body, you eat less.
You probably knew I was gonna stop it right there, huh? There is so much to unpack already, even in those just like 7 words. This is just misinformation about what intuitive eating is, as this creator's page tends to be. Intuitive eating is not a tool that is supposed to be used to help you eat less. But that's what she is marketing it as. Now, it is true that some people may end up eating less than what they usually do when they start intuitive eating and ditching the diets, and they learn how to listen to their hunger cues. This happens a lot for those who struggle with binge eating, especially if they're someone who doesn't eat enough throughout the day, they have a lot of food rules, things they're restricting, and they end up binge eating oftentimes later in the day. They might find that once they are eating more consistently, they've made peace with food, they are no longer binging, and so they are overall eating less than what they usually have been. But there are so many cases where intuitive eating actually helps individuals eat more, especially if they are going from chronic restriction, doing diets, not eating enough.
Because we're all, a lot of us, eating too much. And I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings or be judgy, because I was there with you. Eating too much, in between diets, always eating too much, because I'd just been on a diet. And a diet mentality sets you up to overeat. So I'm not even blaming me or you or anybody for overeating. You got to get off that. But intuitive eating is a perfect way to do it, to help you eat less. And I do not know why people refuse to allow intuitive eating to be an excellent tool to get your happy weight and stay there permanently. It's like many things were built for one purpose, but then ended up being great for another purpose. Like I used this example recently. Aspirin, they didn't know that was going to help you if you had a heart attack, but it does.
She goes on to give an example of how aspirin is not currently being used for what it used to be used for, illustrating the idea that it's totally fine to use intuitive eating for restriction, eating less, and losing weight. But intuitive eating is actually a weight-neutral self-care framework. This means that weight cannot be a goal when you are striving for intuitive eating, even if that goal weight is your happy weight, which I'm guessing this person is referring to as like your set point weight. When someone is working through intuitive eating, but the entire time they are thinking about how their weight is going to be affected, this makes it very difficult to actually make peace with food, to allow foods to be eaten unconditionally, to honor your hunger, to feel your fullness. Because even if their intention is to do all these things, to do all the different principles of intuitive eating, if the whole time they just have this fear of gaining weight throughout the entire process, that is just going to trigger restriction in one way or another. And like we said in the previous review, intuitive eating recommends getting rid of all restriction. All in all, what she's selling is not intuitive eating. There are parts of intuitive eating in there, but she's kind of like making it work for her own agenda. This unfortunately is just one of countless examples of intuitive eating being incorrectly advertised. It really is great that intuitive eating as a framework is becoming more well-known, more popular, more talked about. But there is a lot of risk that comes with that, including people misinterpreting it and selling it as something that it's actually not. I think a really big reason why intuitive eating is often misinterpreted and advertised incorrectly is because people just can't seem to accept, or they refuse to accept, that there is an alternative to dieting, always striving for weight loss, eating less, and restricting something. This approach is what we've been sold as health promoting for so long. So of course, the idea of weight neutrality, being allowed to eat all foods, moving your body in ways that aren't just for punishment or to burn calories. These concepts are, of course, so foreign. So that makes intuitive eating really hard to accept and really hard to sell in its truest form, which leads to people like our friend here shifting it and twisting it and making it about weight loss so it sells easier. Before I end this video, I have a few final notes just to kind of recap all of this. Number one, a professional that truly understands intuitive eating will tell you that intuitive eating is not just listening to your body, especially at first, and especially if you are someone who has been dieting for a long time and there's a huge disconnect between you and what your body is trying to tell you. So those who critique intuitive eating saying that it is just listening to your body and that's why it doesn't work, have a bit of a point, but they're not actually describing true intuitive eating. Secondly, I think that intuitive eating can be for every person as long as we understand that it's going to look differently for every single person. I especially agree that intuitive eating is kind of the best case scenario when the alternative is some kind of diet. And yes, that includes pseudo dieting like calorie counting or just being healthy, which in one way or another usually involves some form of restriction. So you can call this non-diet approach intuitive eating or whatever else you want, but I think that approach, whatever you want to call it, of not restricting and truly finding peace with food is something that everyone deserves. And I'll say this too, if you really do feel your best counting calories, cutting carbs, intermittent fasting, only you get to decide how you eat, what you eat, when you eat. No one gets to tell you to stop doing those things, not even your dietitian, not your doctor. When I am working with a client and they tell me they have a desire to count calories, it is not my job to say, whoa, we cannot be doing that. That is so bad. Don't even think about it. That's not my place. At the end of the day, if she wants to count her calories, she gets to do that. My job with that client, also in this video, is to just help you dig a little bit deeper into what your food choices and your behaviors around food, kind of what leads to your food choices, what the intentions are behind them. Essentially, my job is to just illustrate the alternative, because there is one, and it doesn't involve cutting out foods, restricting, and hating your body the entire time. And I think that right there is a really great place to end this video. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe so you always know when I'm posting a new video. Until next time.